the week that destroyed ASIC. Martin North, John Adams, in the interests of the people. Hello again, John.
Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm pretty good. This is a really important show. It's been quite a week.
It has been quite a week, Martin. Martin, over the last month, we've only really done one program, and we've there's been so much going on behind the scenes. We have a lot of big news coming up over the next 6 weeks that I think is going to really move the needle. But can I say, Martin, we've had some people on this show who have kept on saying that our efforts to expose ASIC and seek genuine public policy reform is going to amount to nothing. And I think what we can say is this week is the week that destroyed ASIC. We had some amazing things happen. We had the 7:30 Report doing a massive expose on Monday night with Adele Ferguson, and this was about the Nuix case study where over $1 billion of retail investor wealth was basically swindled by some corrupt officials at the company and some shareholders. And yet, when it came to ASIC investigating how that whole collapse happened, they basically didn't pursue any charges, any offences related to the prospectus, and then there's a massive insider trading case. So that was all covered on Monday night. And then on Wednesday and Thursday, Martin, we had 2 days of public hearings from a whole host of stakeholders who have had an absolutely negative experience with ASIC. And ASIC has been attacking me behind the scenes, is calling me crazy and I'm a nutcase. I'm a conspiracy theorist, and yet I haven't testified yet, and I think I'll testify at some point later on in the year. But can I say, Martin, I don't think I really have to testify now, because it's no longer a John Adams conspiracy theory, or John Adams wrote a report that's oversimplified and superficial, which is what ASIC has officially told Parliament about my report. We heard chapter and verse from witness after witness after witness as to how dysfunctional ASIC is, and it was just stunning. I mean, I knew it was bad, Martin, but some of the testimony that I heard this week actually blew my mind. I was very surprised with what we saw. Now, I think, Martin, what I want to do with the audience over the next few shows is to play a few excerpts from some of the key witnesses and just highlight some critical points so that the audience knows for sure how serious this situation is with ASIC. But for today's show, I want to play the testimony of the former chairman of ASIC, James Shipton. James Shipton testified on Wednesday afternoon and his opening statement was 14 minutes. It was the most extraordinary speech I've ever heard by a public senior official, and it was one for the ages. And it was stunning and shocking on many levels. And before we play into the clip, I thought, Martin, why don't we get your views about the week that was? And obviously, any comments about Mr. Shipton before we get into his 14-minute speech?
Well, John, it was a very important week. And what I found fascinating was how the same themes kept coming up again and again. So things like failure to take timely action, the investigations, not being effective or pretty much incomplete, but also conduct issues as well, and internally organizational issues within ASIC. And then, of course, Shipton came in over the top and basically said, well, it was an unmanageable ship, basically. I mean, he was in charge, right? So when he was actually appointed some time ago, and then, of course, was kicked out. So it was really fascinating to see the same messages coming up again and again and again from all directions. And you're right, this is no longer Adams versus ASIC. This is ASIC versus the world, because pretty much everybody, even those who are more on the side of wanting to, find a way to work with ASIC and support ASIC. They're actually as bad, in terms of their criticisms. So everybody is actually on the same page now. ASIC needs to change. And the Shipton thing was just, it was mind-blowing, absolutely was. And we should play the clip and, go through and just listen to what he said.
And I welcome Mr. James Shipton. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses and evidence has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, could you please state your name and capacity in which you appear?
James Shipton. I'm a senior fellow at the School of Government at Melbourne University.
Thank you, Mr. Shipton. Do you have an opening statement?
Yes, I do.
Please.
Mr. Chair, I had the privilege of being ASIC's chair from 2018 to 2021, and I'm very proud of what my colleagues and I were able to achieve. Unfortunately, my last months were tainted by unacceptable conduct from a senior colleague and a billionaire defendant. And I'm here today because the institutional responses to those incidents were fundamentally flawed. Reform is needed to the way these incidents are handled. In particular, WHS guidelines always need to be followed. ASIC's governance structure also needs reform to ensure commissioner accountability and the clarification of leadership responsibilities. I am also here because several statements made to Parliament by ASIC are incorrect. They are damaging and in need of clarification. When I raised these concerns, Treasury informed me that they needed to be put to Parliament. So here I am. I've always been greatly influenced by General David Morrison's words, "The standard you walk past is the standard you accept." They were said in 2013 in response to unacceptable workplace behaviour. Today, I'm stopping walking despite the advice of many who have warned me that I will pay a heavy price. Unfortunately, in both cases of inappropriate conduct, the then government and ASIC did virtually nothing to stop it, nor deter it from happening again. When I asked for protection, it was refused, did not arrive as promised, and when some of it did arrive, it was too late. ASIC and the then government walked past what was happening to me and others. This must never happen again. No one is immune from being a victim of unacceptable workplace behaviour. I was the chair of ASIC, a law enforcement agency. That offered no protection. The system failed me, and I need to prevent it from failing others in the future. And despite what some may say, my appearance is exclusively aimed at preventing history repeating itself and to advocate for reform. From November 2020, I was subjected to 6 months of intimidatory advertising attacking my character, competence, and integrity. This consisted of at least 43 prominent advertisements with eye-catching yellow background in leading newspapers. They were published by a defendant charged with offences instigated by ASIC during my time. The advertisements were soul-destroying for me, my family, and my friends. They were relentless. They cut me to my core. Before I go on, I must say that all those allegations could not be further from the truth. One Sunday morning, after months of relentless advertising, I broke down in front of a newspaper stand as my own face and fanciful words about me stared back from a yellow newspaper page. That was when the advertisements finally became too much. That was when I wanted to end my life. And because I was a serving law enforcement officer, and because I did not want to act in any way to jeopardize the investigation, I looked to ASIC for protection and support that only came half-heartedly months later. I've learned a great deal from this experience. One is that workplace bullying does not have to come from a superior or a peer. It can be perpetrated by an outsider or someone less senior. Moreover, workplace bullying can happen in the print and cyber media where it continues for eternity. Most importantly, I know that workplace bullying very often results in human harm. So what surprised me when the advertisement started was that the then government and ASIC, then led by an acting chair, offered no protection or support, nor did they for the 3 months of relentless advertising that followed. Not one email, not one concerned phone call, no protective measures, nothing. At the time, ASIC and the Treasury made no attempt to be a protective employer, nor did they meet the minimum WHS standards required by law. The only communication I received at the time was from a cabinet minister who called to say not to worry about the advertisements and not to make a fuss. I cannot fathom why that minister could treat the well-being of one of his senior officials, let alone a fellow human being, with such blatant disregard. When I returned to work in early 2021, after 3 months of relentless advertising, I asked ASIC for protection and help. Eventually, after 5 months of abuse, ASIC began looking at the issue. Then after 6 months of the advertising, but only after I'd left ASIC, did ASIC write to the newspapers questioning their publication. Only one large newspaper group ever responded. The other did not even bother to reply. Despite my request that ASIC push for a response, they never did. To this day, I am astounded that ASIC did not press that corporation for a response. This certainly does not reflect a confident and ambitious corporate regulator. I'm still astounded that it took ASIC a total of 6 months to take protective action. And by the time they did, I had already left. Finally, I am astounded at how reputable newspaper groups could stoop to publishing such defamatory advertisements and thus enable the attempted intimidation of a law enforcement officer. Law enforcement officers should not be left unprotected for months and months. This must never happen again. Most importantly, I remain concerned at the precedent the advertising created. Law enforcement officers should not be defamed and intimidated when doing their important work. This could amount to a perversion of justice. It must be deterred. The abusive advertising campaign was not just an attack on an individual, it was an affront to our system of justice. Accordingly, I suggested to ASIC that it was in the public interest for this intimidation to be deterred. When ASIC declined, I explored taking steps to do so personally, but ASIC refused to provide me with the documents necessary to commence an action. ASIC and the then government just walked past, leaving the behaviour undeterred and other law enforcement officers in harm's way. I was also subject to inappropriate behaviour in the workplace from a colleague. In the interest of natural justice, I will not name that person, nor will I comment on specific matters that have been subject of official processes, however faulted those processes may have been. I will only say that the unacceptable behaviour was very serious, did not just impact me, continued for months, was relentless, and took an awful toll. Like the incidents just mentioned, ASIC and the Treasury were slow in their response and only intervened after I had left. I instructed the person in writing to stop their inappropriate behaviour. That person did not. Very early on, I asked Treasury to intervene as the portfolio department. With the advice of both my lawyers and ASIC's lawyers, I wrote to the Treasurer once in an official capacity and the Treasury Secretary on 3 occasions in a personal capacity. I frankly and honestly informed them of the situation and sought their help and intervention. I also spoke with the Treasury Secretary and the Deputy Secretary multiple times. Treasury did not intervene for months, and so the unacceptable behaviour was allowed to continue and the harm compounded. You may wonder why, as ASIC Chair, I could not stop this behaviour. The practical reality is that a CEO can only do something about an employee's behaviour if they have the support of the broader system and is empowered to act. ASIC's deficient governance structures that need reform meant that I did not have the authority over this person. Meanwhile, Treasury failed to intervene. So even though I was nominally superior to the transgressor, the behaviour continued right up to my last days in office. After I left ASIC, there was a confidential investigation. I provided evidence and was interviewed. I was not told of the outcome, despite believing as a person impacted that I should be provided at least some comfort that my testimony served a purpose. I was never assured that measures were put in place so that others would be protected into the future. Unlike other recent precedents, a heavy cloak of confidentiality surrounds this investigation. History shows that fairness does not operate well in the dark. This is especially so when even the processes adopted were kept secret. Sadly, it appears from recent statements to the Senate that ASIC and Treasury did not even apply applicable WHS guidelines. They just walked past this unacceptable behaviour. Since the revelation of how the investigation was handled, I've been troubled about ASIC's disclosures to Parliament. I believe there are several factual errors requiring clarification. ASIC has also failed to properly consult with individuals affected by these statements. I've made submissions to this committee about this and understand they are being considered. Importantly, there have also been statements made to Parliament by the current ASIC chair rationalising the conduct in question as historical, occurring during a period of upheaval at the senior-most level of the organisation, occurring because of the particular circumstances that happened before the current chair's term commenced, that all ended when I left ASIC. ASIC's senior-most level singular not plural, is clearly its chair. Accordingly, these statements unambiguously refer to me. I understand I'm entitled to a right of reply to any adverse comments made to Parliament, and Chair, with your permission, I would like to exercise that right now.
Yes, you can proceed, Mr. Shipton.
Thank you, Chair. Any suggestion that I somehow contributed, provoked, or caused the behaviour in question is factually incorrect and without merit. Instead, I did everything I could to calm the situation, lead ASIC as best I could in trying circumstances, and get Treasury's help that did not come. It is factually wrong and a denial of natural justice to suggest publicly to Parliament that I contributed to the behaviour in question, or that I failed to respond appropriately. These assertions have never been put to me. These statements also suggest that the people the subject of the conduct were somehow to blame. The ASIC chair also professed at the same hearing that he did not know much about the investigation's origins, even though it is extremely relevant. As such, he conceded that he would not have known about how I immediately, openly, honestly, and directly informed both ASIC and Treasury officials about my concerns on a continuing basis when trying to resolve the situation. In closing, my attempts to raise these important concerns with ASIC and Treasury were rejected. Instead, Treasury informed me that they have, quote, no obligation to advise ASIC, one of their portfolio agencies, to correct erroneous statements to Parliament. Instead, Treasury just walked past. Again, I'm sure some will criticise me for coming here today, and to those people, I can only remind you of General Morrison's words that followed his important warning. He said it especially applies to those who, by their rank, have a leadership role. If unacceptable behaviour in the workplace can happen to the chair of ASIC and nothing is done, it can happen to anyone. The system needs to change, otherwise history will go on repeating. Meaningful reform is urgently needed. In the meantime, ASIC and Treasury need to stop walking past these behaviours. Thank you.
Okay, well, there we go. We have it in wonderful Technicolor, John. What was your key takeaway?
Well, the key takeaway, Martin, is that you have the chairman of ASIC pretty much called the current chairman of ASIC a liar, someone who's misled Parliament, someone who has basically pushed out spin about people on the commission, which he says is basically blatantly untrue. So the fact that the former chairman of ASIC has called the current chairman someone who has misled Parliament by providing incorrect statements, I thought that was a very stunning thing. The other stunning thing, Martin, is that obviously organizational chaos and disarray at the top of ASIC. And the interesting thing, Martin, is that a number of the big case studies that have been being presented during this inquiry of where ASIC did the incorrect thing, or where things went off the rails, or they didn't take timely action, or some of these investigations were defective. A lot of these things happened during, and if I'm going to be honest, during Mr. Shipton's tenure. Now, some of these things go back before his time. Some of these things have happened during the tenure of the current chairman, Mr. Longo. But in some of these instances where these cases or these examples have gone off the rails at the top of ASIC, it was absolute chaos. You had infighting. You had, according to Mr. Shipton, bullying. You had appeals to restore some sort of order at the top of ASIC. And yet, Treasury, the government, the Frydenberg, no one was willing to intervene to actually ensure that ASIC was operating in terms of an effective Commonwealth agency. But, the other thing that was stunning to me, Martin, is you have the chairman of ASIC saying that he sought protection from Clive Palmer, who was running these ads, but also from this internal workplace bullying issue. And yet he said ASIC failed him and failed to protect him. And I'm thinking to myself, hang on, if you're the chairman of ASIC, if you have the power and you're saying to Parliament now that the organization that you controlled, you couldn't control it to the effect of actually providing you with support and protection, what does that say about the organization as a whole? And what does it say about, in terms of ASIC's willingness and ability to protect the financial system, investors, consumers, etc.? If they're not willing to protect their own, why can we conclude at all that they're willing to protect the community at large? One. But two is that this organization of 2,000 people, it is so rotten in terms of its culture that you had the chairman of ASIC who had all the power. He couldn't direct the ship. And the fact that he repeated this theme time and time again, he appealed to ASIC for assistance and ASIC refused to assist him. I'm thinking to myself, well, if you can't give an order and that order is not going to be followed, well then who really has the power at ASIC? Who can actually direct resources in a way that actually, in order to get an outcome? So just across the board, Martin, it is, I've never ever, I've been in politics for 20 years. I've been a bureaucrat. I've worked in Canberra for a long time. I've seen a lot of people come and go. I've never seen this. And so over the next few shows, we're going to show other people who have given bad experiences. And one of the things, Martin, is that when one person criticizes ASIC like me, general approach is deny everything, attack the individual, say everything's okay, and really try to deflect any issues that would expose it to genuine criticisms. But when you have the former chairman of ASIC basically go on the record in Parliament and basically blast it like no one's blasted it before, it is impossible to my mind that the inquiry can conclude that the status quo is sustainable. I think we're going to get to a position where the inquiry will have to conclude that there has to be a fundamental restructure of ASIC. So I think there's a view to break up ASIC into multiple agencies new leadership, new staff, new laws, a completely redesign of the entire of the landscape. And I think Mr. Shipton's contribution is going to be one of those nails in the coffin. We're going to look back at this in 12 months' time and say that speech, the way he delivered that, it was devastating for ASIC, because at some point ASIC will have to respond formally. Now, the only thing ASIC has responded so far is to say, well, we disagree that we misled Parliament on this issue. But given how lengthy this speech was, ASIC will have to respond to this and all the other criticisms. And while for 9 months have been able to say that Adams is crazy, they can't say everyone's crazy, and they can't say that the former insider, the former chair, is crazy as well. So we are going to see this inquiry basically say we need a complete we need to start again. We need to shut this organization down, and we need to recreate something that's actually going to work. And that reform effort that's coming is because of this channel and because of what you and I have been working on for 12 months.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, of course, because Senator Bragg did at one stage say ASIC was a Sikh organisation. I wonder whether he knew ASIC, right? The point is, we've now had this on full display from multiple points of view. And I agree with you that this is, absolutely underscoring that this is not just a minor restructuring or a bit of a change at the top. This is a fundamental question about what the future nature of the organisation should be, or organisations, because I think it probably does need to be broken up. And I also make one other point, John, that we're talking very much about ASIC here, but of course there are other entities, other regulators who I certainly believe are also not up to scratch either. And I think this is potentially symptomatic more broadly across the way that the regulatory frameworks in Australia work, which is why the whole thing is just a bit of a joke. So I wonder to what extent the evidence here relating to ASIC should be read across into other agencies too.
Well, I mean, I don't deny, Martin, that there are problems elsewhere, but the reason why I've been so passionate about ASIC is because it is the worst of the worst. And you've never seen, the former head of the ATO or the ACCC or any other government department or agency talk like that, number one. But two is, you've had 15 years of failure, 15 years of complaints, 15 years of repeated attempts to fix it, and they can't fix it. And I think this week is the week where the walls of the dam have broken, and we've seen too much for the genie to be put back into the bottle. And so all I can say is I think this week's a very significant week. It is a sick organisation. It's not just full of people. We haven't just seen chaos in terms of disarray at the top. All those things you talked about not taking action, too slow to act, defective investigations, unprofessional conduct. We heard it all this week. And Martin, if the audience thinks that and we're going to showcase this in the next few episodes, but the best is yet to come, and the best is going to be revealed on this channel, because it's not just incompetence, it's beyond that, and we're going to show what ASIC is really like when you really dig deep into this organisation.
Absolutely, John. Well, once again, kudos to you for continuing to drive the agenda and getting the inquiry up, and I'll look forward to traversing the next few weeks and months. So there are going to be more hearings, I think, so there'll be more opportunities to get more data, but we'll certainly share more with our viewers here. And as we have been, interests of the people are actually driving the agenda, and we will keep doing it for the interests of the people.
Absolutely.
Martin North, John Adams, in the interest of the people. We'll see you next time.